You all remember that time when Joseph Joestar was introduced to us? There he was, a stranger in New York City, about to try his first ever soda, when suddenly, BAM! He's robbed by a speedy kid by the name of Smokey Brown. Smokey is immediately caught by a pair of New York's finest, and Joseph thanks the officers for their assistance. And of course you don't remember that because that's not how it happened at all. The cops corner Smokey and start beating on him, demanding he start stealing on their behalf. And when Joseph confronts the officers, they decide to keep Joseph's wallet as, quote, evidence. Yep, these boys are corrupt, down to their very cores. And Joseph lets them know exactly how he feels about their brutish behavior.
You made the wrong move!
In a mere 2 minutes and 58 seconds of animation, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure puts one of America's biggest problems on display for every viewer to see: police brutality. And it's not just against Smokey. As soon as Joseph begins pushing back against these government thugs, Joseph is threatened in a way that should sound all too familiar.
You were shot resisting arrest!
Incredible. Racism, excessive force, extortion, and false charges to excuse murder. All in under 3 minutes of television. Later on in this same episode, we see Joseph once again standing up for Smokey, this time to a gangster who doesn't want someone of Smokey's, how shall we say, complexion, eating at the same restaurant. It's true, 1938 was a dark time for race relations. Things really wouldn't get better for some time, but the good news is that things did eventually get better. Few today would dare act like this pink-haired jackass in public. And though it was probably unusual for the restaurant JoJo was visiting to willingly serve anyone black in those days, discrimination based on skin color is 100% illegal in the US. But it's become increasingly apparent that the level of force police use isn't always justified. We really need a JoJo to stand up and fix this country. And I think I have just the JoJo in mind. But we'll talk about that later. As of late, the very right for the police to use force at their own subjective discretion has been called into question across the country. And qualified immunity might soon be a relic of the past. But how did we get to this point in the first place? Well, you see, qualified immunity was created in 1967 to provide government officials, primarily police officers, protection from frivolous lawsuits when they were acting in good faith in unclear legal situations, especially if their actions led to them crossing some sort of line. If a police officer were to violate your constitutional rights, you could sue that officer. However, in order to win, your case would have to be good enough to overcome the defense of
the officer was just doing his job, and it seemed reasonable at the time to take such action.
And of course, this started being used as a legal defense for excessive force. An officer could now kill a civilian and use QI as a valid legal defense. Fast forward to 1994, a certain then senator who is currently running for the highest office in the U.S. helped draft a piece of legislation called the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act. Critics of this bill have pointed out that it led to an acceleration of mass incarceration and even targeted black communities specifically. When asked in 2016 if he regretted the bill, Vice President Joe Biden stood by his legislation. Quote, "It worked. Put 100,000 new cops on the street. It restored American cities." End quote. When George Floyd was killed by a Minneapolis police officer and the resulting protests turned into riots, President Trump threatened to send in the National Guard. Quote, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." End quote. This threat rang familiar for many, as it wasn't the first or even the second or third time this phrase has been used. A Miami police chief who was accused of racism used this phrase in 1967. But before that, it had been used by at least 2 segregationist politicians during the 1960s. When pressed about his use of the phrase, Trump appeared to backpedal, saying that he was unaware of the connotations and that he only meant to preserve black lives by discouraging riots. Whether his apology meant anything to the black community or not, things did not get better. And the Trump administration has, at this point in time, done nothing to quell the unrest in America. I want to talk about Code Geass for a moment here. If you haven't seen the show, you should definitely go watch it. It's about 10 hours long if you binge the whole thing. In that show, the Holy Britannian Empire has conquered Japan and turned its citizens into second-class citizens called 11s. The protag here is Lelouch v. Britannia, the exiled son of Britannia's 98th emperor, and he wants to see Britannia fall. At first, his mission is selfish, but in time, his dedication to the cause becomes backed by a desire to see the world freed from Britannia's tyranny. Something about this series stands out from most other anime. Most anime that has a government of some kind playing a role in its story will agree on one thing. If the right people are in charge, everything is good. But if bad people are in charge, everything is, well, bad. Take Naruto, for instance. If the Hokage is a good guy, then the people are happy and taken care of and everything's great. But if the Hokage is a bad guy, then it's pretty much hell on earth. And I'm looking at you, Danzo. But here's the thing. If you have a government with enough power to ruin a country because the guy at the top isn't a nice person, then that government has too much power. In Code Geass, Lelouch knows that no one should ever have the kind of power that Britannian emperors wielded, which is why at the end of the series, massive spoilers ahead for the record if you haven't seen the series, when Lelouch takes over, he immediately begins performing all sorts of benevolent acts so that he might become the villain and take over the world. Stay with me here, it's a little complicated. Ultimately, he needed the world to see him go from being their hero to their enemy. And finally, he sacrifices himself through a staged assassination. Now, the people of the world ought to know not to put their fate in the hands of anyone. No more emperors, no more authoritarians, just freedom. Well, that's what I got out of it at least. I'm also reminded of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Another story you might have already seen, again spoilers, Amestris is a military country, the head of state is pretty much unopposable. And when Führer King Bradley is revealed to secretly be one of the homunculi working to end humanity, it becomes clear that the fight our heroes have is going to be much more complicated, as everyone in Amestris loves Bradley, and he has the military at his disposal. Now, Colonel Mustang has plans to take the reins of the country for himself, so that he might reform the government. And as Lieutenant Hawkeye reveals to Ed, after Mustang has become the Führer and made up for the crimes committed against the oppressed Ishvalan people, he, Hawkeye, and all the others who took part in the Ishvalan War of Extermination will be tried as war criminals. To Mustang and his crew, it's not about holding power. It's about doing what's right. Mustang even assigns Riza Hawkeye, his bodyguard, to kill him should he ever stray from his righteous path. If he gets greedy, if he develops a bloodlust, if his motivations should become more about revenge than doing what's right, he believes better that he die than inherit the Führer's power with a corrupted conscience. If you think that everything will be okay if we give the keys to an all-powerful government machine to the right person, you're wrong. Because that all-powerful government machine is the problem. It doesn't matter who you think the right person is. When Obama was the president, the Republicans argued that the president had far too much power. And Obama did expand the powers of the presidency, just like Bush and just like Clinton did before him. But when the Republicans took over the presidency, guess what happened? The exact same thing. Trump expanded the power of the presidency, but the Republicans don't have a problem with it now. And the Democrats who supported Obama all of a sudden do have a problem with these actions. And what do they want to do? They want to put Obama's VP in as the president. It's just more of the same, over and over again. And meanwhile, the country is literally burning in some places. Police officers are assaulting and arresting people who dare to exercise their constitutional right to protest. Protesters are trying to get the message across while rioters burn down cities. People like Breonna Taylor are being murdered without cause, and people like this asshole are saying that you're either on my side or you're my enemy. So, to you who gets to vote this year, I ask you, who deserves your vote? And I'll tell you right now, the vast majority of people planning on voting this year are only voting to keep the other guy from winning. It's not that Mr. Blue believes in Joe Biden. It's that he fears another Trump term. It's not that Mr. Red believes in Trump. It's that he fears what the Democrats will do with the presidency. Look, this isn't a political channel. Here we like to lift weights and talk anime. But recently, you may have seen our new show, The Power of God in Anime. It's more or less a theological podcast, one where we talk about religion, because talking about theology is something that I love to do. There's another cause that's near and dear to my heart, and it's the cause of liberty, which is why I want to stand against racism and police brutality. It's also why I will call out people who vote out of fear. Right now, many Americans believe they have two options. There's the sexual assaulter with authoritarian values on the right, and there's the sexual assaulter with authoritarian values on the left. But there's a third option, and support for her is growing. Her name is Dr. Jo Jorgensen, which effectively makes her a JoJo. She has pledged to pardon every incarcerated citizen who was only charged with victimless crimes. She wants to end the war on drugs and end illegal wars in the Middle East. She plans to veto any spending that would lead to a deficit, but she also has very practical plans to lower the cost of healthcare and to take care of the environment. With the Jorgensen presidency, I believe that something that has seemed far-fetched for so long could finally be a reality. Unity among countrymen. She also favors the ending of qualified immunity and wants to see a drastic reformation of how we police our streets. I love my country, and I want to see freedom become the norm here again. I want to see people take the threat of authoritarianism seriously, like Lelouch and like Mustang did. I want people to stand up to racism and corrupt police just like Joseph Joestar did. Please look into Jo Jorgensen. You can find a link to her website in the description box below, but no matter what happens in the coming months, and no matter who wins this election, we should all resolve to put an end to the overbearing power of our government and its use of force. My name is Stephen Ross, I'm the anime trainer, and I approve this message. And until next time, good luck and train hard.